The sources of suffering are all internal. There is really no point in blaming anything external, someone else, or some other circumstances for how I feel. The earlier I take full and absolute responsibility for my own well being, the higher my well being is going to be. It's very tempting to point the finger at someone and say, I feel miserable because this person did that, or that person said that, or the circumstances are not right, or the market changed, or I lost money, or my startup failed. But this is the attitude, the worldview that makes us fundamentally unhappy. The sooner we assume the total responsibility for our well being and realize that it's all inside us, the happier we'll be.
My name is Wei Ting. I'm your host at Founder Meditations. Today, we're very excited to welcome our guest, Evgeny, with us today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Evgeny is an entrepreneur. He started Makers Academy, which is one of the first and largest coding academies in Europe. And Evgeny transitioned out of his CEO role in 2020 and has been working as an executive coach, working with startup founders to be happier and more productive. I'm sure we'll be discussing about that today as well. So, Evgeny, welcome.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
So let's get started. Let's just go back to the beginning first. Can you share with us very quickly about your life's background and how you got to start Makers Academy?
Yeah. So my career began in technology. I was a geek, like a classical geek student when I was at school, and at uni I studied computer science at university. And in my 20s I worked as a software developer. So really I learned how to build things using code. And this experience helped me to realize that there is a significant demand for software developers. And no one really knows how to train them in a way that is relevant to the needs of modern companies, especially startups. And so we started Makers in 2013 in order to help complete beginners to become software developers and do it much faster and much cheaper than getting a computer science degree.
Can you share more about your experience as the founder and CEO at that company?
Yeah. So it was definitely very exciting, also highly stressful at times, and in a way, very stereotypical. Lots of pressure, big dreams, putting in long hours, working really hard to build a business. And in the process of building the company, I eventually realized that while I love the company, while I'm very proud of what we do, how we do it, our students, and we trained over 5,000 of them. So lots of them describe their experience as life-changing. And yet I couldn't really escape a feeling that I'm not doing what I should be doing with my life as a CEO. And so eventually in 2020, 7 years after the company was founded, I hired someone else to run the business instead of me and stepped down as a CEO to focus on my current career as a founder coach.
Throughout the journey, I wonder how has the practice of meditation play a role in this? Can you also share with us, have you started meditate after you moved away from the CEO role, or when did you start meditating?
So I had no interest in meditation whatsoever until I started the business. And my very first attempt to meditate my was driven by my desire to be less stressed. It was in 2013, in the first year of founding the business, and the first year of founding a startup is stressful. You're a founder, you know what I'm talking about. It's long hours, lots of pressure, constant uncertainty. And so I tried meditation just to take the edge off, just to calm down a little bit, just to not be not to feel under so much pressure all the time. And then I went to my first meditation retreat the following year, which was a bit of a disaster because I quit after 4 days. But then I returned for another one the following year. And in fits and starts with some challenges, I eventually figured out how to fit meditation into my life. I learned how to do it.
Can you share with us a little bit more about your first failed attempt in the meditation retreat. Was that one of those 10-day Vipassana?
Yeah, yep. So in 2014, I went to a 10-day Vipassana retreat without really understanding what I was signing up for. I've never been to a long retreat, and I don't think I even meditated for longer than 20 or 30 minutes before going into a 10-day retreat. But the biggest challenge was that at that point, I was really stressed. Probably at some point of the burnout. It was after the first 2 years of building the company, and it just felt like a never ending constant pressure. And what I really needed, what I was looking for, was a break. I naively thought that, okay, for 10 days, there will be no email, no Slack. People say it's going to be peaceful and so on. I just want a break from all this craziness that's been going on in my life. And what happened quite predictably for anyone who actually has any experience of going on retreats, instead of it being restful, what happened is that I got really aware of all the craziness that's been going on in my mind, all unprocessed and very strong emotions, all my fears, all my anger, all my dissatisfaction with whatever is going on. It, instead of becoming quieter, everything became much louder. And I was sitting there thinking, oh my god, I'd much rather be back at my misery in the office dealing with investor emails and whatnot than sitting here doing nothing. And after 4 days, I quite literally just couldn't handle it anymore. I went to the teacher and said, I'd rather sign up for a physical torture than this. It was just unbearable. And so I left the retreat. I called a therapist that I know and said, my mind is just not in a good place whatsoever. I don't know what's going on. I think I just need to talk to someone. And after that, for a few months, I think I didn't meditate at all. But eventually, I don't even know why, but eventually I found my way back into meditation again. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and over the years learned how to approach it in a better way. So let's put it this way: I don't recommend to other people. I don't recommend doing what I've done to other people. It was not a good way to go to your first retreat.
And it's actually very heroic of you to attempt another one, I guess a year after the first attempt.
Yes, about a year later, I went back because I approached it with a completely wrong attitude. It felt, okay, I understand that this is a big challenge and I'm strong enough to overcome this challenge, so I'm go and endure this misery for the full 10 days instead of 4 days. And this is a completely wrong mindset to approach meditation retreat. And what happened is that, yes, I did complete the retreat this time for the entire 10 days. And it was really 10 days of nothing but misery. I did not understand why other people say that meditation is can be calm and blissful, why other people are looking forward to it. I left the retreat being quite angry, feeling like, okay, I've done it. I can put a tick to this box, and I'm not coming back ever again because this is like the worst idea ever. So I've done it basically just to prove to myself that I can do something difficult, but this was a completely wrong way to approach meditation in general and Vipassana in particular.
Fascinating, because understandably, you will guess that some of the founders would approach this with the exact same mentality. Startup founders are one of the most strong-willed human beings on earth, and I would assume a lot of us would see, oh, going to a 10-day Vipassana retreat. Other founders have said it's one of the most challenging things they've ever taken. Great, people might just sign up just to prove that they can stand up for the challenge. So it's fascinating
Yeah.
to hear that you're actually one of them as well.
Yeah, that's effectively what I've done. And when I approach the retreat in this way, seeing it as a challenge, that's what I've got in response. I've got a massive challenge and a massively unpleasant experience that didn't really teach me anything useful in the moment. So it wasn't until I think a couple of years later that I went to my next retreat, which was a much shorter and much milder one, that helped me to approach meditation in a more constructive way.
Oh, so after these first two retreat experiences, you have not given up on meditations yet at that time.
I haven't given up on meditation, and I really don't know why. I really should have and could have, but something inside me was, I guess I had the feeling that there is something interesting to learn here, that there is something valuable here. And it wasn't until I came across a book on meditation called The Mind Illuminated by a meditation teacher called Chuladasa, who basically, Chuladasa wrote a book that described meditation in a way that made sense to me intellectually. I still couldn't meditate, but I read the book and I realized, okay, this is how it's supposed to work. I understand what I was doing wrong. I just need to approach it in a different way, and it's worth learning. And also, at around the same time, I had a depressive episode, which was really quite unpleasant. It was painful enough that I thought very seriously that I really don't want to ever experience it again. And if I don't want to have another depressive episode and experience this level of mental pain again, I really need to learn how my mind works. And if meditation is a way to understand how my mind works and where all those feelings, although very unpleasant feelings, are coming from, then I've got to learn how to meditate. And I found a book that made sense to me. And but the funny thing is that I approached the meditation from the same founder mentality. I said, okay, starting from tomorrow, I'm going to sit for 1 hour a day, come what may. And that's what I did. That's what I've done day after day, month after month, without seeing any progress, without feeling any bliss, without really having anything to show for it. I was sitting for an hour a day just because I thought that my willpower is strong enough to force me to do unpleasant things. Again, I really don't recommend this approach. This is probably the most stupid thing I could have done, but I didn't know better. I didn't have anyone really to talk to about it. And so I just forced myself to sit and meditate until at some point, about maybe 7 months later, things started to shift. And I've got my first sense of, oh, this is how it's supposed to work. And from then on, my resistance to meditation started to drop. And then I started reading other books and going to other retreats and learn how to approach it in a more constructive way over the next few years.
So you used to see meditation as an extreme sport, basically.
In a way, in a way, just by forcing my way through, which is not a good idea.
What caused the shift that made you realize, oh, this is how it's supposed to work?
I guess just the amount of practice. By that point, I had been sitting, trying to concentrate on my breath for an hour a day for about 7 months. And at some point, just the sheer amount of practice, even though I didn't feel like I was making progress. But now I understand that my mind was nonetheless making some progress. And after about 7 months, I had a mild realization that sounds so simple that basically I don't really have to react to thoughts. A thought can arise, a thought goes away, and I really don't have to do anything about it. And it sounds so simple and obvious right now. But actually having this experience of, oh, I can just watch everything like in the cinema and I don't have to do anything about it, it was enough for me to say, okay, it's not a cessation of suffering, it's not enlightenment, it's not the final answer to any of my problems, it's not a big deal in any way, but it gave me a sense that I can make progress here. And so it really inspired me to meditate more.
By that point of the journey, how was running the startup like for you? And as you were warming up to meditation, did you also start sharing this practice to other colleagues? Did you try to make your colleagues meditate with you as well?
I hope not. I don't remember, to be honest. I did not make a secret out of it. I was meditating in the office, and whoever was willing to meditate together was very welcome too. But I don't think I tried to insist or even suggest that others learn how to meditate. And I say I hope not, because I know how annoying it can be. When someone comes to you and says, "Yes, I've discovered meditation. This is a great thing, and you should do it," it's probably going to put you off instead of inspiring you to meditate. So I don't quite remember, but I hope not.
While your practice in meditation continued to progress, did it have any impact on your day-to-day operations as the CEO of the company?
If there was an effect, it was probably relatively mild. It helped me to be a bit less stressed, to have a bit more perspective. But meditation is a very slow work, and I had a lot of work to do. Like, if a few days or a few months or even a couple of years of meditation just doesn't magically transform the person into a completely different being, or at least it didn't happen in my case. I was learning how to meditate, and in progress, I continued to work. And I don't think there was any huge dramatic change in what I was doing as a founder and as a CEO.
In terms of timeline, we're talking about 2017, 2018-ish. And I'm curious what happened and how did you decide to transition away from the CEO role?
From the meditation perspective, I just continue to meditate with a big focus on consistency. Going on a retreat here and there, sitting for an hour or so a day, and just seeing it as an important part of my life without really expecting any results. And I think in hindsight, it was a pretty good decision, because meditation is a great practice, but it usually doesn't deliver immediate results. And the entire attitude or expecting something from it is not helpful. So I decided that I'm going to meditate and not really expect anything. And I was meditating month after month, year after year. On the professional side, in 2019, I uh, realized that I'm really not enjoying what I'm doing as a founder and a CEO. And the company also needed a different CEO with a different skill set. And it was a good moment to start thinking about stepping down one day. It took quite a while to orchestrate the transition, to find a successor and to hand over the company. But about 14 months later, in 2020, I stepped down as a CEO, and also at the same time moved to Portugal.
Can you share more about your decision to then become a coach to founders?
I've been So when I was a founder and the CEO, I was working with several founder coaches over the years, I think with five of them. And I couldn't really escape the thought that this is something that I would love to do one day. It felt like something that's very aligned with who I am. I really enjoy meaningful, long one-to-one conversations, as opposed to selling the vision or fundraising or running a senior team. So all the things that the CEO is supposed to do, but and I can do it, but it's not something that I want to do for the next decade of my life. And but year after year, as I was thinking about, okay, what am I doing? Where my career is going? How do I want to live my life? I was gradually moving towards doing something which involves helping people on an individual level, having interesting conversations, and having a relatively simple lifestyle. When you're a founder and CEO, it's really difficult, probably impossible, to avoid pressure, and often a significant amount of pressure. And I really wanted to build a lifestyle which is just simpler. Working one to one with clients, not having a team to manage, living in a nice and quiet place, and working remotely. It just helped me to build a lifestyle that I'm pretty happy with.
If you were to look at the timeline, it feels like as of 2017, 2018-ish, the Evgeny by then was still this stereotypical startup founder who's relatively almost always stressed out, living in their heads all the time. But
Yeah.
now you completely strike me as someone who's very zen, who's almost like a spiritual teacher to founders. So I'm curious, what happened between then?
I'm definitely not a spiritual teacher. Although, funny enough, I did start a meditation teacher training program earlier this year, just literally a few months ago.
Oh,
But I'm not a teacher yet, and if I ever going to call myself a spiritual teacher, it's years away, and I will need much more experience before then. But you're right that in 2017 I was a stereotypical, very stressed startup founder, thinking that yes, I love the company, but something is not quite right in how I live my life. And that the depressive episode made it quite clear that if I continued on the same trajectory, my lifestyle would eventually kill me quite literally. It was just not going in a healthy direction. And then actually there was another moment it's probably important to mention. In 2018, I think it must have been 2018 or so, I had my first psychedelic experience. Magic truffles in Amsterdam, absolutely nothing special. I created a ceremony for myself with eye shades and nice music in the background in a dark bedroom, and took a fairly large dose of magic mushrooms. And long story short, my first psychedelic experience gave me an experience that I would describe as pure consciousness, not being identified with anything at all. And of course, it was made possible by psilocybin, and it ended as soon as the effects of magic mushrooms ended. But I remember that the main thing I took out of that experience is that it's possible for my mind to experience itself in a dramatically different way. And if I need to meditate for the rest of my life to learn how to do it without magic mushrooms, then it's absolutely worth it. It was such an incredible inspiration, like a preview of what my mind is potentially capable of, and that really inspired me to keep on meditating and going on retreats and reading books and so on.
is there any other wild stories about psychedelics or ayahuasca ceremonies that has happened?
Yes, there is one I wanted to share. So in 2019, I went to my first ayahuasca retreat in Peru in South America. And at that retreat, it was a 2-week retreat with a local shaman and a Buddhist teacher in the States. It was a unique retreat because it was blending plant medicine tradition with the Buddhist teachings from a meditation teacher. So over 2 weeks, we had 7 ceremonies. And in one of them, I met in this fantasy psychedelic, impossible to describe world. I met my father, who has been struggling with cancer for the last, I think, more than a decade or so. And at the time, his cancer was getting worse, and it was a bit of a source of concern given that he's in his 70s now. So in that ceremony, I remember meeting my father and taking cancer out of his body, putting it into mine, and then vomiting it out because you do vomit during ayahuasca ceremonies, and then going through this process again, out of his body into mine because I'm young and healthy and can handle it, and then vomiting it out, and then again. Anyway, long story short, after that retreat, his cancer became significantly better without no obvious reason. So it didn't quite,
Wow.
and of course, correlation is not causation. So I'm not saying that retreat caused it to improve, but you asked for a wild story, and it is a bit wild because his cancer did become significantly better and went into remission for I think the next 3 or so years. And my father is still very much alive, still with cancer, but somehow these two things coincided: my experience on ayahuasca somewhere deep in the jungle, and his experience of his cancer becoming better without an obvious reason.
Oh, this is both incredible and miraculous. I mean, it's good to hear that your father has been getting better with or without your
Thank
help.
you. We'll never know.
Yes. Wow. So what's your take on psychedelics' role in your spiritual journey? Do you think this has really induced a step function towards a better? Or
As far as I can tell, don't really help directly with the spiritual journey, as in they will not make me a better meditator if I microdose mushrooms in parallel. But a psychedelic experience can seriously challenge your perception of the world, which shows that a different perception is possible. a different way to experience the world is possible. It shows quite clearly that what we normally experience, what we call a normal state of consciousness, is just one way of experiencing the world. And until we experience something else, it's very natural to think that this is the only way possible. That how I see the world is what's real, this is how things look, and this is how everyone else is experiencing the world. And then a psychedelic experience can really help. It helped me to understand that, yep, my normal perception is absolutely valid. It's very helpful, but it's only one way of experiencing the world, and there are wildly different ways to experience reality. And this, for me, this served as an inspiration to continue to meditate.
Is there any resources other than psychedelics that you recommend to other founders to look into? Say it a YouTube channel, books, spiritual teacher, mobile apps that you recommend?
So I don't think there is a single app or a single book or a single resource that will work for everyone. That's an interesting thing. In my experience, different things work for different people. Different teachers and different books resonate with different people. So if you uh, come across a book on meditation and it makes no sense to you or doesn't resonate with you, maybe a different book will, or a different app will, or a different approach. Some people love the Zen tradition. Some people just can't stand Zen tradition, for example. Having said all of that, a few things I usually recommend is one is the Waking Up app by Sam Harris. It's a meditation app which has a collection, which is a pretty good library of different teachers with different meditation styles. There are guided meditations and talks on meditation, podcast episodes, and lots of material to explore meditation from different angles. So I usually recommend it as a starting point because there is a useful introductory course by Sam Harris and also lots of different things. So you can listen to different teachers, try different styles, and find something that feels right for you. In terms of specific teachers, there is. So right now I'm taking a course on how to teach meditation with two teachers from an organization called Buddhist Geeks. They are Vince Horn and Emily Horn. They What I like about Vince and Emily is that they are very real and very down to earth. They are not Zen masters from a remote mountain who have been sitting in a cave for the last 70 years. They are Americans living in this world, facing the same difficulties and challenges that each one of us is facing. And this makes them very relatable. And I think this is important. It's really important to relate to a teacher. So I recommend Vince and Emily Horn. They are a community called Buddhist Geeks. You can find them at buddhistgeeks.network. Another teacher that I also recommend highly is called Burks. But he is not particularly well known. He's not a superstar like Tara Brach or Jack Confield. He lives a simple, very simple life somewhere in Europe and teaches a small number of people. But he's incredible. He's got a few books on Amazon, an autobiography, a few manuals on meditation, and also on his website. He's got two websites, Art of Meditation and Advanced Vipassana. Both of them have absolutely excellent resources. I think Burks is one of the few living meditation teachers that are reasonably accessible, and he really knows what he's talking about. So these are some of the two teachers I want to mention. Now, let me mention a third one. Another teacher that I really respect is Henry Shukman. He is a Zen teacher, also very relatable, very down to earth. He just released a meditation app called The Way, I think a few months ago, and I've been using it daily ever since. I really like it. It's very different from all other meditation apps out there. And if you're interested to try his approach, uh, try his app called The Way.
Henry Shukman, I think he comes from the Japanese Zen tradition.
Yes, that's right. He's a Zen teacher. Yes.
Is there any particular tradition that you follow the most?
Don't. So I don't follow any particular tradition very narrowly, but I'm most familiar with Theravadan Buddhism. as opposed to Zen or Vajrayana or many other flavors of Buddhism.
Yeah. As for your regular daily practice, so is there any type of meditation technique that you do mostly?
So these days I experiment with different techniques. Sometimes I use guided meditations. Sometimes I do silent sits. Sometimes it's a concentration practice focused on something in my body, basically just putting my attention in one place and keeping it there. Sometimes it's choiceless awareness, recognizing this awareness, the silence in which everything else is arising, and just staying there. So I would say that right now I'm trusting my intuition to guide me in terms of what is most helpful, what is right, what do I need to practice in this moment.
I'm very curious about how do these practices help you to work with founders as their executive coach. Do you typically recommend the founders who you work with to start meditation, or do you gift spiritual books to them?
No, I don't. I don't even mention meditation unless it comes up in a conversation naturally. In my experience, so let's put it this way: pretty much everyone is aware that meditation is a thing. There are no people in our world, in our tech world, right now who never heard about meditation. If a person is naturally drawn to it, I can definitely encourage and help and maybe point in the direction of some teachers. Also, some of my clients respond better than others to meditative techniques or coaching techniques that use some skills that are built from meditation. Like, for example, working with emotions by staying with what's happening in our body. It works absolute wonders for people who are willing to do it. For many founders, the idea of trying to address their problem by figuring out what's going to happen if we keep the attention on, let's say, a knot in my chest for 10, 15, 20 minutes. For many people, it sounds crazy. And if it sounds crazy to them and they're not willing to try it, there is no point in forcing it. But for people who are open to it, yeah, we can do some real magic in terms of resolving internal conflicts or processing difficult emotions or just getting a different perspective by bringing more awareness into the presence. But I never force it if it's not unfolding by itself.
Yeah. So I guess I could really use your recommendations because there are numerous occasions, say talking with family members or colleagues or friends who are founders. There are often times where it's very clear that the problems that they're facing are internal, right? You're basically bothered by their own thoughts, right?
Yeah, like all of us.
Oftentimes I will point those out to them, and of course the level of their receptivity varies depending on where they are in past life experiences. But I'm just curious, if you were to work with founders who I guess are relatively mind identified in their thoughts all the time, what's your typical approach to help them?
So, as a coach, I try to meet the client where they are. So sometimes it can be really helpful to help the person to disidentify with the thought. For example, by inviting them to say, "Hey, can you notice that this is just a thought that your mind is offering you?" And many people will say, "Oh, yes, now that you pointed out, I can see it." With some others, it really doesn't resonate. And if it doesn't resonate, trying to force it is, in my experience, not particularly helpful. But even if a person is identified with their thoughts, it's still possible to do a lot of good work because it can be, even if we are identified with our thoughts, it's much more comfortable to be identified with nice and positive thoughts and better stories that are just more constructive and are serving us better. And so, one move that we can wait is just trying to see that what we experience is just a projection of our mind and we don't really have to identify with any of this. And another way is to say that, okay, let's just not get into this entire conversation about watching what's going on, but let's make sure that the contents of our experience, the contents of our mind is the contents are more positive than they could have been otherwise.
I'm curious about your life as a CEO coach right now. What kind of founders would approach you to ask you to be their coach? And usually, what kind of topics do you guys talk about?
So, so when it comes to founder coaches or maybe coaches in general and clients, it is a bit of a mysterious process of mutual attraction. So when a founder comes across a coach and feels that there is something good that can come from working with this person, it's there is a sense that there is something to explore here, and this chemistry between a coach and the client really matters. At the same time, there are a couple of specific topics or specific areas that I tend to focus on as a CEO. And the first one is what I call transition from founder to CEO. When the company starts to scale, when the company gets maybe its first layer of hierarchy, it's a proper senior management team, the company is maybe 30 or 40 people at this point. The founder needs to start operating in a different way, less like a founder and more like a CEO. And for people who are going through this transition for the first time, it can be quite a counterintuitive process. So that's one area that I tend to focus on. And the other area is situations when a founder CEO is considering stepping down for whatever reason. Maybe it's performance, maybe it's burnout, maybe it's change of life circumstances, maybe their board is asking them to step down. But they've got the question of okay, I'm running this company, but maybe I should be doing something else. How do I make a decision? And if I do decide to step down, how do I actually get it right the first time?
What made you to be basically specializing in this particular topic, CEO transition?
It was not my intention when I started coaching. But when I did start working with my first clients, I noticed that people who reach out to me because of my own experience of stepping down as a CEO. So, and of course, everyone's experience is different, but I noticed that my experience of realizing that I should not be running this business and hiring someone else to run it instead of me resonated with other people. Other people started to reaching out to me, and as a result, I learned more about how it works and started working with more people who found themselves in this situation.
Yeah. And disclaimer to audience on the show. So Evgeny runs a series of workshop in this topic. I was part of the group that was part of this. So I'm very grateful for your work in this
Thank
topic.
you.
And you're publishing a book
Yes,
in this.
on this very topic, startup CEO succession. This book is an expression of what I learned over the last few years about founder CEO succession, based on my own experience, the experience of my clients, and also on dozens of interviews with investors, lawyers, and everyone else who is involved in such a transition. So I hope it's going to be a good book. We'll publish it this summer, and I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Can you share a little bit more about these topics? Because I'm also a founder CEO who has, I guess, successfully transitioned out of this role. I'm curious, historically, why has this been so hard for a founder to make this transition?
So, founders, as founders, we often assume that we've got to run the company until either the company is dead or the company is sold or becomes a global empire. We take people like Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos as role models, thinking that we've got to go all the way from an idea to hiring the first employee to making the first sale to raising the first round, all the way to running the global empire or selling the business. However, first, some companies find themselves in a situation when they are doing just fine, but they are not on a runaway growth trajectory, but they are not dying either. They're just good businesses. And uh, and the founder might ask themselves if they want to keep running this business for the next 5, 10, 20 years, or they've got some other priorities. It's also true to say that the requirements for the CEO change very considerably as the company grows. What is needed when the company is 5 or 10 people is a founder, someone who makes sure the company is alive, finds the product market fit, and gets to the first, let's say, to the first stable place. At some point, the company will need a CEO, someone who knows how to run the business that makes the product, someone who knows how to build a senior management team, how to run an organization. And this is a different skill set. This is a different skill set when the company is 50 people, 70 or 100 people. When the company gets to 300 or 500 people, that's a whole different game. That's, again, a new job, a new skill set. If a company gets to thousands of people, that's a whole different skill set. So basically, we are talking about vastly different jobs, and we call them the same with the same title, Chief Executive Officer. And some people, again, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and many others, they evolve from one job to another, learning how to manage the organization at different stages of the journey. And there is nothing wrong with this. If it works, great. But for many people, it's just not the right thing to do. Many people get the company, let's say, from 0 to 50 people or 100 people, and then realize that for the next stage of growth of the organization, they need to attract a different chief executive with a different skill set. If I use myself as an example, we started the company in the business to consumer space, working directly with the students. I was training the students directly, really enjoying this direct customer contact and building the product myself. 7 years later, the business was making most of its money from large corporates. We've got clients like the government, Google, Deloitte, Accenture, and other really big and exciting names. But that's a very different kind of client. And if I think about what the company needs for the next 10 years of growth, it needs a chief executive who really understands the needs of large corporates like Google and Deloitte. And that's a different skill set, which first, I do not have. And more importantly, I'm not really interested in growing it. I just did not want to spend the next decade of my life figuring out how to sell multi-million contracts to large tech firms. But there are people who are excellent at this. And this is the kind of skill set that the company needs. And for these reasons, sometimes it makes perfect sense to change the chief executive.
You're absolutely right. And most founders idolize superstars such as Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos. And to me, I actually recall one of the turning points is that listening to the interviews by Naval Ravikant and his founder coach, Matt McCurry, about Naval's journey, stepping down as CEO of AngelList and just be founders. It was actually the first time where I listened to like someone who's famous in the startup circle, and that it is okay or even recommended for someone who sees himself no longer the best fit for the role to step down. So my take is that it will be amazing if we can have more successful case studies of founders stepping away from the CEO role, yet the companies will eventually continue to become successful. I think that could make this even an encouraged thing for founders to do when the time is right.
Yeah. And I really hope more people think more openly about this, because taking the company from an idea to the point of when it makes sense to change the chief executive and when it's possible to change the chief executive is a mark of success. It's not a failure. It's a success to get the company from here to there. And a lot of founders see this as a failure, see stepping down as a failure regardless of how much progress they've made. And I just really don't think that's right.
Yeah. Is there any other topics about CEO transition that I like to share with us?
Some founders, in my experience, are stereotypical founders and not CEOs. They are excellent at the early stages of the business. When it's messy, when they need to get their hands dirty and find the product market fit and do crazy pivots and move fast and break things. Some people are excellent at this. And this is a very different skill set from operating something that works. When you've got a company and processes and the dashboards and KPIs and long-term planning and the compliance and the legal counsel in the office. These two skill sets are different, and some people are great at being a founder, other people are great at being a CEO, and relatively few people are great at doing both and enjoying both.
Yeah. Have you worked with any founders who thought that they want to transition out of the CEO role, but then eventually realize that maybe running the company turns out to be their true passion eventually? Have you?
Yeah, yes, it does happen. Sometimes when we're really tired, especially when the founder is at a certain stage of burnout, it can be really tempting to say, okay, I can't do this anymore. I should not do this anymore. I need to quit, find someone else to run the business. And what sometimes happens is that the person steps down and realizes that what they actually needed was a long holiday. They just
Mm,
needed to find a way how to run the business more sustainable. Or maybe they don't step down, they reflect on it and realize that they just need to change how they do things. And the right answer is different for every person. For somebody, it might be a long holiday or a sabbatical. For someone else, it might be a 4 day work week. For someone else, it might be something else. But stepping down is not always the right answer when you start thinking about it, because under a lot of pressure, it feels like the most obvious thing. I'm suffering, I'm in a lot of pain, this company puts a lot of pressure on me, I need to get out. Maybe, but it's not always the only answer.
yeah. So, Evgeny, you've had years of practice in meditation. You have a lot of realizations throughout your roller coaster like entrepreneur journey, and you have been working with tons of founders to help them do the same. This is amazing. What are some of the key insights that you have learned after all these years?
Maybe the main one is that uh, pain is really different from suffering. These two things are not the same and should not be confused. There is pain and there is suffering that comes with pain, usually. But they don't have to be the same. And the sources of suffering are all internal. There is really no point in blaming anything external, someone else, or some other circumstances for how I feel. The earlier I take full and absolute responsibility for my own well being, the higher my well being is going to be. In other words, it's very tempting to point the finger at someone and say, I feel miserable because this person did that, or that person said that, or the circumstances are not right, or the market changed, or I lost money, or my startup failed. But this is the attitude, the worldview that makes us fundamentally unhappy. The more the sooner we assume the total responsibility for our well-being and realize that it's all inside us, the happier we'll be.
There are actually some founders who romanticize suffering, say an Elon Musk. What if Elon were to come to you and tell you that, well, he actually does, well, I don't know him personally, but he seems to be someone who seems to be suffering quite a lot. His mentioned about running a startup feels like eating glass, staring into the abyss. For someone who has tremendous success, yet seems to not really enjoy himself, but seems to enjoying the fact that he's not enjoying himself, enjoying the fact that he's having pain. I'm just curious, what's your take on this? And would you have any recommendation to him?
I don't think I would be a good coach for Elon Musk. I think we're very different people with very different worldviews. But and again, I don't know Elon personally. So what I'm saying is really based on my perception of him as a public persona. But my understanding is that Elon, for whatever reasons, made a conscious choice that some things in life are significantly more important to him than his own well being. And I don't question the validity of this choice, because it's his choice, it's his life, it's his responsibility. And quite possibly, this choice even helped him to make incredible progress in business and build iconic companies. However, there are plenty of founders, including myself, that don't think that feeling like you've got to eat glass daily and stare in the abyss just as a condition of existence is necessary.
No. Now looking back, has your definition of success changed over the years, or has your life goals changed from the start of for your entrepreneur journey versus where you are right now?
I would say that my experience of life has changed. If you asked me the same question 10 years ago, I would probably have said something like, I want to achieve this goal or to get to this outcome in order to be successful or feel good about myself. Or basically, I would describe success as something external to me. Whereas right now, what feels important is just experiencing life as a dance and being in the moment, just living it. Because life always happens in the present moment. The only thing we ever have is our present experience, what's happening right now. And the more fully I engage with what's happening, the more present I am to what's going on, the better I feel, and my life also seems to be okay as a side effect. Yes, if you ask me, yes, I've got some goals for my coaching business and some ideas about what I might be doing a few years later, but it feels much more secondary as in just something which is generally helpful in a conventional way, but what really matters in life is what's happening in the present moment, and that's really enough in some fundamental way.
Let's do our quick lightning round next. So I'll shoot you with a few
Okay.
questions and you can answer as quickly as possible from your intuition. How's that sound?
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. So what's your level of happiness right now from a scale of 1 to 10?
Pretty happy, 4 out of 10.
Okay.
Would you
Okay.
like me to elaborate?
Yes, please. I would have guessed this must be a 10 out of 10 or 12 out of 10, but please.
No, I would say 4 out of 10 because, and I would describe it as a pretty happy state because what we normally experience as happiness is actually not nearly close to what we're actually capable of. I would describe 10 out of 10 as someone like the Buddha or someone who is completely free of suffering. It's a whole different level of experience entirely. If I think about the abject misery on the one end and someone like the Buddha on the other end, I think maybe even 4 out of 10 might be a charitable way to describe my experience. Maybe it's 3 out of 10, if not lower. In other words, yeah, I'm a pretty happy person, but I'm also aware of what is possible in principle for a human being.
Wow, that's very enlightening. Is there a common misconception about meditation or spirituality that I'd like to clear up?
That meditation involves believing in something, whereas it's a skill that can be learned and can be practiced. It's all
Oh.
about personal experience and not about believing something or someone else.
Is there any true thing that you believe in that few people agree with you on?
I'm pretty convinced that free will does not exist. I don't know how many people disagree, but my sense is that most people assume that they've got something called free will, that they are free to make decisions, just like I can decide to continue this conversation with you or I can just hang up right now. But I think on a closer examination, as far as I can tell, I just can't remotely find or even imagine something that could be described as a free will, as in free from some other conditions that actually determine the action.
Yeah. I think Sam Harris would definitely agree with you on this. I would personally agree with you on this as well. I'm just curious, with this belief in mind, how do you operate? Do you then sit back and don't do anything?
Well, the answer is both yes and no. So in a conventional way, a belief in free will is extremely useful. Just for example, a company also doesn't exist. A company is just a legal structure, which is a combination of endless different things. But if you try to find a single thing that you would say, okay, this is my company, you will not be able to find it. But nonetheless, it doesn't stop us from using a company as a very useful mental construct that enables this company to exist and lots of good work to be done. It's a useful construct. that I use day to day, and I'm grateful for it. At the same time, from a completely different perspective, this life is just happening and it goes on. Even if I resolve not to make any decisions for the rest of my life, something is still going to be happening, and I will be aware of what's going to be happening. There's two completely different perspectives. From one perspective, I'm making decisions and I'm participating in this world in a very, let's say, conventional way. And from a completely different perspective, I'm aware of what's going on and I really don't have to do anything about it.
If there a message that you can share with 1 billion beings, think of it like a virtual billboard that you can magically deliver in front of 1 billion people. What message would you like to share?
If you've got your basic needs met, if you've got food, shelter, safety, healthcare, so if you've got your basic needs covered, what separates you from being completely happy is the state of your mind. If you don't have your basic needs met, if you're hungry, you need to eat. You don't need the lecture of meditation. But if your basic needs are met, then what separates you from being completely happy is your own mind and the level of training that you've done or haven't done.
What do you think is the meaning of life?
There is no meaning of life. Life is there to be lived, to be experienced. Just like there is no meaning for the ocean, it just is. And we can participate in life. We are life. The more fully we experience life, the more we show up to life, the more meaningful it gets. If life has any meaning, it's definitely not a thought or intellectual idea that we can formulate. The best answer to this question is just to go and experience life as it is and stop thinking about meaning of life.
One final big question. Do you know who you are?
Uh, but I would take the depth of my not knowing as as an indication of at least some progress on this question compared to a few years ago. Because a few years ago, I probably would have said, "Yep, I do." Whereas right now, I'm pretty certain that I don't, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Awesome. This is wonderful, Kenny. Thank you so much for sharing all these wonderful insights. Is there any other advice that you want to give to other startup founders who are curious about meditation, who have not started yet, or someone who will be interested but somehow struggle to find time to do it?
Um, so I would focus on. So first of all, I would focus on consistency rather than time. If you try to find an hour a day and you haven't meditated before, it will be difficult. So focus on doing a small amount of time, let's say 10 minutes a day, but doing consistently on most days. Maybe not 7 days a week, but maybe 5 or 6 days a week, but sticking to it. And if you've got 20 minutes a day, maybe break it in two 10-minute sits instead of one 20-minute sits. Again, more frequent and more consistent will probably take you farther than one long sit. And don't make my mistake. Don't try to approach meditation with an attitude of, I'm going to force my way through it and I'm going to suffer the pain until I get it. It works, but it's really not the shortest path. It's much easier to learn how meditation works and what it can offer if you approach it by relaxing into it and letting go into it and not seeing it as a struggle. It's really important that meditation just feels good. Not always easy, but there is something joyful about it. And if you've got a meditation teacher, someone who's got the relevant experience and has been teaching others, it can be really helpful to keep in touch with them on a regular basis. As I mentioned, Vincent Family Horn that are leading the teacher training program that I'm part of, they are great, very accessible, and down-to-earth meditation teachers that you could potentially reach out to.
Awesome. Before we leave, is there any other final insights or wisdom that you'd like to share with our fellow founders here?
Maybe don't overthink it. Life is for living and enjoying and being in the moment. And whatever the questions you've got, the chances are that the answer is not going to be intellectual, but it's going to be experiential.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you online?
My website, Evgeny.coach. It's spelled Evgeny.coach. So you'll be able to find more information about me and what I do there.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for the time, Evgeny. We appreciate this.
Thank you, Waiting. I really enjoyed the conversation.